I very much understand the council's perspective about the need to set priorities, as well as the limitations on state funding, and the need for locals to step up and provide funding as well, as they have, like the Public Policy Institute report showed. So in the old bypass in particular, first of all, I think it's important to note that there's differences between projects that Doug Brown described, where we're actually there's state and federal proposals that have public benefits, and the county is trying to figure out how to maintain the existing uses, and other infrastructure projects that involve flood control or water agencies. I think it's important to distinguish between them. And I would just say in the Yola bypass, it's obviously the county would like to see things stay just the way they are. They're very proud of the wetlands and the role of the Yola bypass and the migratory waterfowl and the Yola Basin Foundation and all the work that's been done. They thought that they already had a nationally recognized project. They weren't looking to add another use. And so these projects that I'm presenting to you today are really the county saying, okay, how can we make it work? And so the county is not expecting to be putting up local money for improvements in the Yola bypass when they really didn't want the project to begin with. They thought that the environmental and agricultural benefits that were already provided were sufficient. So I think you have to look at the nature of the project before you make generalizations about how much state funding or federal funding should be contributed. And in the old bypass, I would argue that we do have landowners that have said they are willing to put up some funding. So it's not that there's not going to be any local contributions. It's just that there has to be a serious discussion about the public benefits of the projects in the bypass. And all the projects I mentioned today, and I neglected to say two things. One, a significant number of those 12 have fish benefits as well. And we didn't focus on them because we were really trying to talk to the farmers and wetlands managers about what they needed. But there are significant fish passage and floodplain benefits to some of these projects. And the second is that we identified at least 5 Delta Plan policies that the projects are consistent with. And so I think that there is, to Jonas's point about the Delta Plan being a master plan, we are at the local level looking at your plan, seeing where our projects fit in, and trying to be a part of it. And I guess I'll just end with, I want to just support what Susan Sherry said in summarizing that we were asked to talk about the barriers, and that we really are, I think, doing our best to work around those barriers and accept them and move the projects forward anyway. So I just wanted to support. Susan said it more eloquently than I am, but I wanted to also support what she was saying. And finally, we did prioritize our 12 projects. I know that's not prioritizing all 65, but we can only do what we can, in the Yola bypass. And we did make that attempt precisely because of the type of feedback we've gotten from organizations like yours.
Good. Council members, any further questions?
I'll just say I sat through most of these meetings, and it was amazing that you had the diversity of people that sat through these meetings that basically arrived at, there were only about 3 or 4 that got voted off the island. So the rest all made it through, and it was because, and you talk about prioritization, lots of the prioritization was kind of naturally falling into the fact that some were completely planned and ready to go, had some funding, and then others were, still pie in the sky. Guys were saying, it'd be nice to do that. And we said, that'd be nice to do that too. And so that one got on the list. But we knew that one was just, from the nature of the beast, would take forever.
Right.
So,
Right. In response to the priority thing, what we did was had 4 different categories: ready to go, almost ready to go, just sky in the pie. And we did, and I can send you that document. We did rate them.
Idea stage.
An idea stage, right? Thanks. And so we did, because we understand you live in the real world. You have to move things forward. And so what was acceptable for us in the coalition, for people to say, just disclose who's ready to go, and they got a 1. And they self-evaluated whether they were 1 or a 4, and that was our best attempt, because we knew that we needed to be somewhat responsive to what you all were asking for.
I had one last comment. I just wanted to point out that you do have a letter here from Department of Fish and Wildlife and Water Resources, a joint letter, and it's about 3 pages. I know you have a lot of documents, but I think this one is definitely worth reading. It really gives the sense of what the state is thinking as far as the local efforts to try and find solutions in the bypass. I think we're at a critical time here as far as the yellow bypass. I mean, there's some amazing things going on. If you want to try and master plan the bypass and have the state do that, I think you're guaranteed to fail. But what's going on now is the locals are contributing, the state's contributing, everyone who's involved in the bypass is really moving things forward. And so there's real opportunities here.
Thanks, Dave.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, I know the hour's late, but I wanted just to observe one thing and then ask a follow-up question too, because I think several things we've heard, to me, actual themes that are been emphasized by our science program and in our tidal marsh restoration white paper about kind of being able to envision what the benefits of projects would be at a big enough scale that they're create some attraction for interests to involve locals and others and then some of the design work so we can integrate local objectives with the state and federal ones by having a robust science effort that can reduce risk to the regulators are loath to take and reward those who are willing to advance in the face of uncertainty. I think that's all great stuff, and I think we're sort of sniffing down those alleys already, trying to figure out ways to improve our regulatory program if we can't make it the wonderful machine we would envision. But you also mentioned two other things that I thought we haven't talked much about, how to move past that. And that's partly the challenge of having so many relatively small, poorly capitalized, slimly staffed entities throughout the Delta. And even when I hear, as a Yolo County resident, I'm always thinking, hey, our county is pretty good, but I do know how much y'all struggle just to keep your oar in the water on issues like this. And I wonder if there aren't ways to create, for example, more joint powers agencies among the RDs, so you finally would get a single entity that would have the capacity to carry out a large project. I mean, we look at SAFECA as an example of many localities working together to finally get the capacity to do something important, or maybe to use the Delta Conservancy in that sort of way. I mean, they kind of run on fumes now, but there might be some ways that they could serve that role of a sponsor and an expediter and a carrier out. In Louisiana, one of the outcomes of the flood recovery after Katrina was that they didn't eliminate all their local parish levee boards, but they found a way to coordinate them with an oversight agency on each side so that they got the capacity to do the job that needed to be done while still keeping local involvement. And I think there's probably more that we could do in that regard to follow up on some of these issues we've heard here, to create some capacity for folks to move ahead, despite the realities of having to compete for money and work through all the detailed problems we all encounter every day.
Well, that's a good idea, and see what we can do is take that idea back and get people to talk about it, because we have a forum and that's what we're doing. People come up with an idea and we just sit around and go, okay, what do you think about that? So we'll put it in the mix. I think that's a great idea.
And I often hear the RDs say they only have, a couple tens of thousands of dollars a year to maintain their levees. I think, well, you can barely do the mowing for that kind of money, and these are serious projects that require more capacity than that kind of base is going to provide.
I just wanted to really support that idea, and every county is different, but in Yolo County, for example, we don't have a countywide flood control agency or a countywide water agency. There is no East Bay Mud in Yolo County that can step up and help with major projects, and we have 18 small reclamation districts. So it is very much, both with the regional flood plan that Doug's involved with, as well as the Delta work that the county is involved with, it is very much a topic of conversation is how do you create an entity that can support some of the projects that are coming in the future. And I think anything that the council can do to support those conversations it's a very critical conversation to be having right now.
Well, you're all here because we value your input. We thank you all. I don't believe we have any more questions.
Thank you.
So
Thank
with
you.
that, thank you all for coming and continued success.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
Angela, do we have any requests for? Oh, yeah, you're welcome. We have a motion offered by Councilwoman Gray. Second. And seconded by Councilman Johnston to close the meeting in honor of the recently deceased Jack Foley. So I, with sadness and condolences to his family, I call this meeting to a close. Thank you all for coming.